And we're back with Elise Jordan, Gene Robinson, Daniel Goldman, Clint Watts, and Casey Hunt. In the latest example of the record pace at which Democratic attorneys general are suing the Trump administration, acting New York State AG Barbara Underwood is threatening legal action over Trump's proposal to replace the Clean Power Plan, an Obama-era environmental protection standard aimed at combating climate change. Meanwhile, in a separate action filed in June, AG Underwood is suing Trump and his 3 adult children, alleging a pattern of illegal activity relating to the president's personal charity. Joining us now, Fordham Law School professor and author of the book Corruption in America, Democratic candidate for New York State Attorney General Zephyr Teachout. She has recently received the endorsement of the New York Times. Very good to have you on the show this morning.
Oh, it's wonderful to be on. Thank you so much.
So the president, let's just put this out there. He's not above pardoning anybody. That could happen in all of this.
Yeah.
What stands out to you in everything that has gone down in the past 24 hours, and how does it affect your campaign?
Well, it's really critical to understand that federal pardons do not apply to state law crimes. And while New York State has some limits on what kind of crimes could be prosecuted after a federal pardon, those limits are not absolute. And it's really important that we send a signal right now that no one is above the law. There are no get-out-of-jail-free cards. And if Donald Trump moves forward with a federal pardon, we in New York and the New York Attorney General's office, working with local DAs, will be ready to investigate criminal activity that happened in New York of the person who is pardoned.
It's an interesting time for your legal specialty to come into play. Can you talk about what you have specialized and dedicated your career to, and why you think that that could be an asset as Attorney General?
Yeah, I'm an anti-corruption expert. I have 3 days after Donald Trump took office, in fact, I was one of the lawyers who brought a lawsuit in the Southern District of New York demanding that Trump divest his business interests because they're violating the foreign and domestic emoluments clause of the Constitution. And I've been leading the legal strategy, working with others around the country on the emoluments clause litigation that, will require Trump to basically choose between the presidency and his businesses. And we just had a major victory in June. But that deep expertise in anti-corruption law, in constitutional law, is really important right now because we are dealing with new legal issues that we haven't faced before, and we got to be ready in New York. New York State may end up being the firewall against all kinds of things that Donald Trump could do to try to make sure that the law does not apply to him or to his associates.
Knowing about corruption wouldn't hurt in New York State either, would it?
We have a local crisis as well. Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Is that the background that I have? I happen to be one of the few people in the country who had already been engaged in investigating the emoluments clause before Donald Trump became president. But also, one of the key things to understand here is New York State plays a special role. All state attorney generals are important. But New York State plays a special role because Donald Trump's foundation is here. His organization is here. And if you look at what happened yesterday, you can see that the lines between the foundation and the organization and the campaign, just from news reports, are very blurred. Barbara Underwood brought this really critical civil action in June. It's a blockbuster case about the Donald Trump Foundation. But we already know enough to know that we need investigations into the organization as well. I mean, this is like, you got to follow the money. That's Corruption 101, follow the money.
Zephyr, one of the only person who has not pled guilty thus far in the Mueller probe and has been charged is Paul Manafort. And many people, including me, think that he is sort of aligning himself for a pardon. And some of the language that the president has used in relation to Paul Manafort is very similar to language he used before pardoning other people. Can you explain what kind of state charges you think may be brought against Paul Manafort if he does receive a pardon from the president?
Well, it's a very fair question, but since I may be in the position of actually bringing such charges, I don't want to name particular kinds of charges that might come. But the key thing to understand is that New York State has a broad array of criminal statutes involving financial crimes, false statements, a whole range of crimes that we should investigate. And Barbara Underwood has an incredible attorney general. She keeps her hands close to her chest, as she should. So we don't know exactly what investigations are already ongoing, but I will tell you that when I am the next Attorney General of New York, we're going to put real resources into those investigations, because we have to be ready for the real constitutional crisis moment of Donald Trump doing a self-serving pardon to try to protect himself.
I'd like to point out a know your value moment. I love it when I hear a woman saying, I'm going to win, because women just don't say that. They always are like, well, I might just do my very best. Yeah, I'm going to win. Exactly. I love that, Zephyr. Clint Watts, I want to make a point for you to comment on, and then you can take a question to Zephyr. But I really, just given the first hour of this show, I'm a little struck by what Lanny said about Michael Cohen's turning point, that it was Helsinki, and that he saw sort of a devolving in Trump's brain, that his bad behavior was going to extend instead of pull back, and that he could hurt this country. That matches what I feel and know about Trump, that he deflects whenever he's under siege. And many consider this president to be Vladimir Putin's useful idiot. And I am concerned he will make a huge effort to deflect, probably using Fox News hosts as his sounding board, and try and deflect from these headlines, but in the process, put our nation at risk. And as an FBI profiler, is this something that you would be concerned about? Is this a realistic concern? Do I sound crazy?
You're not crazy, and in fact, I think the president even said at different times, he sort of offered up, it'd be a good time for a war, or maybe I need a war, or maybe I need a trade war. Right. Essentially, I need a conflict to distract.
Maybe we ought to take him seriously.
Yeah, he tends to tell you exactly what he's going to do later on. And I've always wondered, sometimes it's hard to tell. North Korea, that was a critical issue a year ago. I think we started talking about on the show that suddenly just fizzled out. You know, we've not seen any progress really on nuclear negotiations. Now we see a lot of ramp up with Iran. Is that really because we need to deal with Iran, or because it's a useful distraction for the president to try and build some sort of a conflict? So I'm worried about those things. And this kind of ties into, Zephyr, I wanted to bring it to you. The question about federal versus state. I work a lot with federal and state law enforcement. And so you've got Attorney General Sessions really pushing on crime, immigration, MS-13. That's what you'll hear him see. You were talking a lot about public corruption and really white-collar cases. How do you see yourself, if you're in New York, really working with the federal government in terms of investigations and law enforcement?
Well, clearly it's going to be important to work with the Mueller investigation and to work also with local DAs. You know, there's different levels of these investigations. But again, New York State and the New York Attorney General has to be a firewall against illegal actions, against cases where, and we've already seen so many with the Trump administration, where the federal government is actually violating the law. Pushing past the limits of what the Administrative Procedure Acts and its EPA rollbacks. Unfortunately, what we see with ICE and CBP is this unbelievable willingness to argue essentially immunity for agents. The extraordinary crisis moment a couple weeks ago where it looked like where a court ordered a plane to get turned around because the Sessions was on the verge of not following a federal court order. And again, it's going to be really important for states to play the role, the New York State Attorney General in particular, as a real firewall against illegal activity at the federal level. And unfortunately, we cannot trust that this administration has been pretty out there claiming immunity, claiming the law doesn't apply to the president, willingness to push the limits of what the federal government should do under its own laws. So states are going to be more and more important in protecting against that.
All right, New York State Attorney General candidate Zephyr Teachout, thank you so much for being on this morning. Daniel Goldman, thank you as well. Coming up, Senator Elizabeth Warren might not be making friends with some lawmakers on Capitol Hill. She's trying to ban members from owning individual stocks. We'll talk about that and much more next on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.